All right, let's dive right in. Today we're going to explore a really fascinating idea, the grand blueprint of reality. We'll be looking at the possibility that our world has hidden structures, maybe even cosmic designers, and that we, all of us, might be on the edge of a huge collective awakening. Let's see if we can piece this grand design together.
So let's kick things off with a pretty huge question, one that's been at the heart of myths and philosophies for centuries. What if all this, our reality, wasn't just a random accident? What if it was actually designed?
And that question leads us directly to our first big concept, the grand architects of reality. We're talking about the potential designers here, the ones who might have built the very framework we're all living in. So, what exactly are these grand architects? Well, you can think of it as a catch-all term. Depending on who you ask, it could be higher dimensional beings, or maybe the programmers of some giant cosmic simulation, or even just the fundamental creative force of the universe itself. What's so wild is how this same basic idea pops up in so many different places. You've got ancient Gnostic texts talking about the archons and modern simulation theory talking about cosmic programmers. It seems like humanity has always been playing with this idea. But a lot of mystic paths add a really cool twist. What if the real architect isn't out there somewhere, but actually inside of us? Okay, so let's zoom in on one of those interpretations, the archons. In some of the old stories, they're like the system administrators, the wardens of this material world. But what if their power works in a way we totally misunderstand? And this right here, this is where it all gets super personal. The old school view sees archons as these external bad guys we have to fight. But a much deeper way to look at them is as internal thought forms. You know, those negative loops of fear or shame or division that we unknowingly give power to. And if that's true, then they're not some enemy to be overthrown, but more like a program running in our own minds that we can actually rewrite.
So, how do they work? Well, think of them like viruses for your consciousness. They can't actually create anything new on their own. Instead, what they do is mimic and implant suggestions into our minds. Suggestions of fear, of doubt, of separation. And the tricky part is, we often mistake those suggestions for our own thoughts.
And this is how they keep going. It's a feedback loop. See, a negative thought gets implanted, and that thought sparks a negative feeling, right? Like anxiety or anger. But then that emotion feels so real and so powerful that it ends up validating the original thought, locking us into this cycle that just keeps feeding itself. The only way out is to become aware of the loop itself. And recognizing that loop, that brings us to maybe the most powerful idea in this whole thing. The concept that our inner world, our thoughts and feelings, are the actual tools we use to build our outer world. And listen, this isn't some new age concept. This is ancient wisdom. The Buddha said it thousands of years ago. With our thoughts, we make the world. Every single thought we hold is like an energetic blueprint that, if we give it enough focus, can actually show up in our physical reality. So, how does that actually work? Well, according to this framework, there's a kind of formula to it. It all starts with a thought, that initial idea. But a thought alone isn't enough. It needs emotion to give it that magnetic charge. Then it needs your belief, your intention to really aim it. And finally, you gotta take some kind of action to anchor that energy into the physical world. Just think of it like this. A thought by itself is just a seed. It's got potential, but it's just sitting there. Emotion is the water. It's the energy that activates that seed and gives it the power to actually grow into something real. That's why getting a handle on our emotional state is so, so important.
Okay, so let's scale this up. If one person's thoughts can shape their own reality, what happens when millions of people start doing it at the same time? Well, that brings us to the whole idea of a collective awakening.
To wrap our heads around this, we need to talk about something called the morphic field. The easiest way to picture it is like a kind of invisible Wi-Fi that connects every single human mind on the planet. And within this field, thoughts, ideas, and patterns can spread from person to person without anyone ever having to speak.
So, what's up with the number 100? What does that have to do with anything? Well, it's a simple little symbol for a pretty mind-blowing phenomenon that explains how a massive shift in consciousness could happen almost overnight.
It's called the 100th monkey effect. The story goes that scientists were watching these monkeys on an island, and once a certain number of them, the 100th monkey, so to speak, learned a new skill, suddenly monkeys on totally different islands started doing the exact same thing. The idea is that once a critical mass of people adopts a new way of thinking, that new pattern can just rip through the collective field, triggering a global shift.
Now, this whole process we've been talking about, from understanding the big design to mastering our own thoughts to triggering a collective shift, is actually laid out in a pretty famous story. Let's take a look at a modern prophecy that describes this very change.
The book is The Celestine Prophecy, and while it reads like an adventure novel, you can also see it as a kind of symbolic roadmap. It basically outlines the exact steps of awakening that we've been walking through, but it frames them as a series of insights that all of humanity is just now starting to rediscover.
And if you look at the key insights from the book, you can see how perfectly they connect back to everything we've just covered. It all starts with noticing synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences guiding you. Then it moves to realizing that our attention is a form of energy that literally shapes reality. Then it's about connecting to a higher source of intuition, and it all leads to this final step, conscious co-creation. That's the 100th monkey effect in action.
So, after all is said and done, all of these huge cosmic ideas bring us right back to ourselves. Because if this framework is real, if our thoughts, charged with our emotions, really do shape our world, and if enough of us start doing it on purpose, well then we're not just passengers along for the ride. We're the architects of whatever comes next. Which leaves us all with one very important question to think about.